There are no words that can truly capture the depth of this loss or the pain this organization and community.
Well, they are remembering her as a leader and an advocate, and her family is asking for privacy at this time here. Now, the way police found out about this is that they had to do a welfare check at the home of Vice Mayor Nancy Metayer Bowen, and police found her dead inside of her home. And now, as we've said, her husband has now been charged with her killing here.
This is being investigated as a domestic violence incident. Her husband, Stephen Bowen, is in our...
In just 10 hours, a life that looked almost perfect was completely erased. In the morning, she was still standing in a crowd, smiling, shaking hands, talking about the community, about the future, about all the good things people believed she was building. The lights, the cameras, the applause, everything was there. Just a normal day. And then, that same evening, the very account that posted those photos shared an announcement that made everyone freeze. She was dead. No time to understand. No time to prepare. No time to even ask what just happened. But here is the detail that gives you chills. At 8 in the morning, that same day, a message was sent from her own phone. And instantly, a raw, blunt question appears: real or fake? Was that message real, meaning she was still alive? Or was it a cover, meaning someone was using her phone to control the story? Right now, you do not need to be a detective. You only need to do one thing: pick a side. Just comment one word. Real if you think the message was real. Fake if you think it was staged. The victim was Nancy Metayer Bowen, 38 years old, the vice mayor of Coral Springs, Florida. On paper, that is a name with weight. In real life, she was the kind of person who walks into a room and people feel her energy. A first-generation Haitian-American woman, well-educated, disciplined, and constantly present in the community. Events, activities, policy work, talking to residents, taking photos with children, shaking hands, smiling, and always looking like she was living exactly the life she was meant to live. Her social media showed the same thing. She looked like someone on the right path. But life has a cruel rule: beautiful pictures are just the front. Light on the outside does not mean there is light inside. Some houses look like heaven during the day, but turn into hell at night. And if you have watched enough true crime, you know this: the scariest thing is not a stranger on the street. The scariest thing is the person sleeping next to you. The content in this video is for informational and reference purposes only. Although it has been cross-referenced with reputable sources, some details may have changed or may not be entirely accurate. Nancy's husband was Stephen Bowen. On the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. The grown-up version of high school sweethearts. Stable, successful, peaceful. They had been together for a long time, built a strong relationship, and got married in 2022. Their happy images were enough to make anyone scrolling past sigh and say, that is a model couple. And that is exactly the trap. A case like this always starts with a beautiful layer of paint. People have to believe in that layer, so when the truth breaks through, the impact is strong enough. According to investigation records and what authorities have announced, Stephen is currently accused of being behind Nancy's death. And if that is true, then this is not just a tragedy. It is a cold betrayal. The kind of betrayal that does not only kill a person, but also destroys the community's belief in the word family. According to the investigation that was made public after the night of March 31st, what caught people's attention was not only the 3 gunshots heard inside that house, but also Stephen's behavior afterward. Authorities believe that instead of reacting like someone who had just witnessed something terrible, he went downstairs and continued the rest of the night as if everything was normal. There was no immediate emergency call. There were no clear signs of panic. There was none of the chaos people would normally expect right after a tragedy. That calmness became the detail that caused the most public debate. Because in most people's minds, when facing a moment like that, the first instinct would usually be to save the person, call for help, or at the very least, show some kind of shock that could not be hidden. But silence that feels too complete sometimes creates more questions than any explanation ever could. And from that moment, the entire story began to turn in a very different direction. It is the action of someone who either has no emotion left or has made a decision so final that emotion is no longer needed. The next morning, April 1st, a detail appeared that cracked the entire story. A message sent around 8 in the morning from Nancy's own phone to her family. The message did not need to be long or complex. Its existence alone was enough to create a major problem. Because from that moment on, nothing fit together anymore. As investigators claim, then who held that phone and sent that message the next morning? And if, on the other hand, Nancy was still alive at 8 in the morning, then what happened shortly after that to lead to the outcome We now know. This contradiction turned what seemed like a clear timeline into a maze. It was no longer a small detail you could ignore. It became the center point that pulled the entire timeline off course. From here, the story is no longer just what happened, but a bigger, more uncomfortable, more haunting question: was that message real, or a carefully planned act? When Nancy did not respond, her family began to panic, not just a passing worry, but the deep fear of people who know this is not Nancy. A call to emergency services was made asking for a wellness check because all communication had stopped. When they arrived, the door was locked. No one answered. No sound, no light, only a silence. So unusual, it made people uneasy. They did not wait any longer. They asked police to break the door. And in that moment, everything changed. This was no longer a family story with vague concern. This was the turning point when reality shifted. Because when the door opened, it was no longer a normal house. It was a scene, a place where life had stopped. And the truth began to show. Inside the house, Nancy was found dead. According to investigation records, her body was covered with a blanket, along with items like trash bags, details that do not need deep description to understand. This was not a normal ending. But the most disturbing part is not what was seen, but what it means. Hiding something is not a natural reaction in panic. It shows there was time, there was thought, and more importantly, there was awareness that this would be discovered. Hiding means there was a process in the mind, thinking, arranging, deciding the next step. It is a sign not of losing control, but of calculated control. And as investigators began to examine each layer of the scene from the smallest details, everything slowly came together into a clearer direction. Not random, not an accident. Step by step, all suspicion began to point to one name: Stephen. Authorities say Stephen did something extremely suspicious. He brought a gun to someone he knew and asked them to hold it. And he added a line that sounds like it came straight from a crime script. If you touch it, wear gloves. Wear gloves. What do you see when you hear that? You see fingerprints, you see evidence, you see awareness of covering tracks. An innocent person does not tell someone to wear gloves to handle their belongings like that. An innocent person in panic would say, "Please help me," not wear gloves. That is the language of someone thinking about legal consequences, thinking about traces, thinking about being traced back. And if the accusation is true, this becomes a heavy piece of evidence, not just the act itself, but what came after the behavior of someone trying to clear the path. Investigators then used license plate recognition systems, almost like eyes that never sleep, to track a Ford F-150 truck. Each sighting, each direction slowly formed a clear route, and according to reports, when police approached, Stephen said something that made everything pause. "They are coming for me. Do you feel that?" That is not the reaction of someone who just lost their wife. A person in that situation usually asks, "Where is my wife?" or "What happened?" But this statement is different. It places himself at the center. It sounds like early awareness, almost a step back in thought, a kind of acceptance that the end has arrived. And statements like that rarely come from someone completely innocent. Then another emergency call appeared, this time not from Nancy's family, but from Stephen's relatives. The caller's voice was panicked, out of control, saying that Stephen had just confessed something. One line was repeated: "I could not take it anymore." This is not a clear legal confession. It sounds like emotional collapse, a moment when everything suppressed for too long suddenly breaks out. But it opens a bigger question. What could he not take anymore? Marriage conflict, personal pressure, control jealousy, financial problems, or a secret that still has not been revealed to the public. In true crime, motive is often the most hidden part, because it is the ugliest part of human nature. You can understand an accident or a sudden outburst, but it is much harder to accept a small, selfish motive like not being able to stand someone else doing better than you. And from here, the case shifts not just who did it, but why it happened. On social media, Stephen's image creates an uncomfortable feeling. He built a familiar mask: morality, family, faith values that make people trust him easily. But at the same time, there is the presence of weapons. These two things, side by side, create a clear mismatch. One side looks clean, the other holds the potential for violence. And there is a rule people often forget: the more someone tries to prove they are right, sometimes the more something wrong is hidden underneath. The more perfect the mask, the darker what may be behind it. This contrast makes people question everything: wedding, photos, status, updates, smiles that once looked real. And then a question appears: what is real and what is just a performance? The scariest realization is that some couples are not truly living together. They are just acting in the same movie. The community responded in a familiar but painful way. Memorials were held. Nancy was not just a person, she was a local symbol, a woman who truly contributed through politics and service. When she passed, people lit candles, placed flowers, gave speeches about light, legacy, and strength. But while the community saw Nancy as an inspiration, the investigation had to go the opposite way, digging into what happened behind closed doors. And that is the painful contradiction. You can be loved by thousands in public, but if one person very close decides to destroy you, the rest can only come after. Stand in silence and remember. This is the cruelest part of domestic violence. It is quiet, it gives no warning. It happens in silence in the place you once believed was the safest. And just when you think everything is clear, the story stops without an answer. A message at 8 in the morning, a small detail, but enough to keep all doubt alive. Maybe the truth is already in the files. Maybe it is still being put together piece by piece. But one thing is certain, not every story ends when the news stops reporting it. Some stories only end when people understand why. And sometimes, that never happens. So the question remains unchanged. Still, there was that message really Nancy? Or was someone trying to keep her alive just a little longer?